Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The office was a ghost town, the kind of quiet that hums with the weight of things unsaid. It was well past midnight, and the Atlanta skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Carter Group's headquarters, casting a soft glow over the chaos of papers and laptops strewn across the conference table. James Carter stood at one end, sleeves rolled up, tie long discarded, his silver hair catching the light as he pored over financial projections. Across from him, Maya Thompson leaned forward, her dark eyes sharp with focus, her navy blazer draped over a chair. They were fighting a war, a hostile takeover bid that threatened to gut everything James had built over 3 decades. But in that moment, the numbers and strategies faded, and something else took over. "You're not listening, James," Maya said, her voice low but firm, cutting through the haze of his thoughts. She tapped a finger on the table, her manicured nail clicking against the wood. "If we don't pivot to the community angle, the board will eat us alive. They need a story, not just numbers." James looked up, and their eyes locked. It wasn't the first time he'd noticed how her gaze could pin him in place, like a moth under glass. Her skin glowed under the dim light, a rich brown that seemed to absorb and reflect the world around her. Her hair, usually pulled back in a neat bun, had loosened, a few curls framing her face. She was close, too close, and the air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "I'm listening," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. He stepped closer, closing the gap between them, drawn by something he couldn't name. "But you're not making this easy, Maya." Her lips parted, a question forming, but before she could speak, it happened. James didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was her. But suddenly his hands were on her waist, pulling her toward him, and her fingers were gripping his shirt. Their lips met in a kiss that was all fire and desperation, a collision of years of unspoken longing. Her mouth was warm, urgent, tasting faintly of the coffee they'd been sharing for hours. His hands slid up her back, feeling the strength beneath her silk blouse. And for a moment, there was no company, no takeover, no world outside this room. Just them, burning. Maya's breath hitched, and then she pulled back, her hands still on his chest, her eyes wide with shock. "James? No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't do this. I'm engaged." The word engaged hit him like a bucket of ice water. He stepped back, his heart pounding, his hands falling to his sides. "Maya, he started, but she shook her head, grabbing her blazer and stepping toward the door. "I need to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll finish this tomorrow." And then she was gone, leaving James alone in the silent office, the taste of her still on his lips, the weight of what had just happened sinking into his bones. He sank into a chair, staring at the skyline, and wondered how the hell he'd gotten here, how a single kiss had unraveled everything he'd spent years trying to bury. "My name is James Carter, and by most measures, I'm what you'd call a success. I'm pushing 60, worth over $400 million, with a real estate empire that spans half a dozen states. I've got a penthouse in Midtown Atlanta that could fit my childhood home 10 times over, a garage full of cars most folks only dream about, and my name's been in Forbes more than once. But none of that matters when I wake up each morning to a view that's breathtaking and empty, a bed that's always cold on one side. You can own the world, I've learned, and still feel like you've got nothing that counts. It wasn't always like this. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood on the west side of Chicago, sharing a cramped bedroom with my brother while my dad worked double shifts at a factory and my mom waited tables. I clawed my way out, putting myself through college with a partial scholarship and 2 jobs, learning to survive on coffee and 4 hours of sleep. My big break came in my 30s when I saw potential in urban redevelopment before it was cool. I took risks, mortgaged my apartment, maxed out credit cards, begged small-time investors for a chance. My first project nearly bankrupted me, but when it succeeded, it changed everything. One building led to another, then another, until Carter Group was a name people knew. Now, at an age when most guys are eyeing retirement, I'm still in the game, running a company with 300 employees and projects from coast to coast. I've got everything I ever wanted, except the one thing I can't have. Her, Maya Thompson, the woman who walked into my office 8 years ago and turned my world upside down without even trying. I remember the day she showed up for her interview like it was yesterday. It was a muggy afternoon, the kind where the air feels like a wet blanket. Carter Group was in the middle of a restructuring, and I needed a new project manager who could handle the pressure. HR had lined up a stack of candidates, but when Maya walked in, something shifted. She wasn't what you'd call a supermodel, not the kind of beauty that stops traffic, but there was a quiet power in the way she carried herself. Her navy suit was crisp, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, and she held a leather portfolio that looked like it had seen a few battles but was still holding strong. "Mr. Carter," she said, extending her hand, her voice smooth with a hint of a southern drawl. "I'm Maya Thompson. Thanks for having me." Her handshake was firm, no nonsense, and when she sat down, she looked me straight in the eye. In an industry full of good old boys and egos, that kind of confidence stood out. She was a black woman in a world that didn't always make space for her, and she knew it, but she didn't let it slow her down. We talked for an hour, way longer than I'd planned. She'd done her homework, asking sharp questions about our latest projects, pointing out risks I hadn't even considered. She had an MBA from Spelman, years of experience at a smaller firm, and a fire in her that I could feel across the table. I hired her on the spot. My HR guy, Tom, thought I'd lost my mind. I usually agonized over decisions like that, but I knew she was the real deal. What I didn't know was how much she'd come to mean to me, how every day I'd find myself watching her a little too long, listening a little too closely, feeling things I had no business feeling. Maya hit the ground running, and within months, she was indispensable. She had a knack for seeing problems before they happened, managing schedules with surgical precision, and charming clients who'd give me a hard time. But it wasn't just her work that got to me. It was the way she remembered everyone's names, from the janitor to the CFO, the way she kept a little notebook with details about her colleagues' kids, soccer games, dance recitals, like it mattered to her. In a cutthroat business where people were often just numbers, she was a damn beacon. I tried to keep it professional, I swear. She was my employee, younger than me by a good 20 years, and engaged to a guy named Nathan Brooks, a civil engineer with big dreams and a steady smile. Plus, there was the reality of our worlds. Me, a white guy born with a certain kind of privilege, even if I'd started with nothing. Her, a black woman who'd had to fight twice as hard for every step. Crossing that line wasn't just risky, it was reckless. But the heart doesn't care about logic, does it? The first time I realized I was in trouble was about 6 months after she started. We were working late on a proposal for a mixed-use development in Charlotte, the office empty except for the hum of the AC and the distant clatter of the cleaning crew. We'd ordered takeout, greasy burgers from a diner down the street, and as we ate at the conference table, surrounded by blueprints and spreadsheets, Maya let her guard down. She told me about growing up in a small town outside Savannah, raised by her grandmother after her mom got sick. Granny used to say, "You gotta work twice as hard to get half as far," Maya said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. But she also said, "Once you're there, ain't nobody can take it from you." Go. I wanted to tell her how much I admired her, how her strength made me feel small in the best way. I wanted to reach across the table and brush a crumb from her cheek, to feel the warmth of her skin under my fingers. But I didn't. I just nodded and said, "Your granny sounds like a hell of a woman." The moment passed, but it left a mark, a spark that wouldn't go out. Over the years, that spark grew into something I couldn't ignore. It was in the little things. The way her laugh lit up a room, rare but rich, like a melody you'd wait all day to hear. The way she'd slip a book into her bag, Toni Morrison one week, James Baldwin the next, and I'd ache to ask her what she thought of them. The way she'd challenge me in meetings, her voice steady, her ideas sharper than anyone else's. I started making excuses to be near her, asking for updates I didn't need, lingering by her desk, stealing glances when I thought she wouldn't notice. And yeah, I noticed her too. The curve of her neck when she leaned over a report, the way her dresses hugged her frame just enough to make my pulse jump. It wasn't just attraction, it was obsession, and I hated myself for it. I kept my distance, or tried to. I dated here and there, women I met at charity galas or industry events, but they never stuck. They couldn't compete with the space Maya had carved out in my head, my heart. Meanwhile, she built a life I only saw in fragments. Nathan proposed, and she showed up one day with a small diamond on her finger, her smile bright, but guarded. I congratulated her, my voice steady, my chest tight. I sent a wedding gift, a custom dining table from a craftsman in Savannah, but skipped the ceremony, claiming a conflict that didn't exist. I told myself it was for the best. But the truth was, I couldn't watch her promise herself to someone else. That brings me back to tonight, to that kiss that broke every rule I'd set for myself. I don't know what pushed us over the edge. Maybe the stress of the takeover, maybe the late hour, maybe just the weight of 8 years of wanting. But when our lips met, it felt like the world made sense for the first time in forever. And when she pulled away, saying she was engaged, it felt like the world ended. Now, sitting here in the dark, I'm replaying every moment that led us here. The late nights, the stolen glances, the conversations that felt like they could have lasted forever. I'm wondering what happens next, whether I'll find the courage to tell her how I feel, or if I'll keep hiding behind my title, my wealth, my fear, because the truth is, I'm in love with Maya Thompson, and I have been since the day she walked into my life. But love like this, across lines of power, race, and everything else, comes with a price, and I'm not sure I'm brave enough to pay it. Hey, folks, if you're hooked on James and Maya's story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Should James come clean about his feelings, or is he right to stay quiet? Let me know what you think and stick around, because this is just the beginning. Things are about to get a whole lot messier. The sun was dipping below the Atlanta skyline, painting the Carter Group's office in shades of gold and amber. James Carter stood by the window in his corner suite, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand, his mind still replaying that kiss from 2 weeks ago. Maya's lips, her warmth, the way she'd pulled away with "I'm engaged" ringing in his ears. It was a loop he couldn't stop. He'd seen her every day since, but they'd both played it cool, sticking to emails and brief updates, pretending the world hadn't tilted on its axis. But James knew better. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. He turned as the door opened, and there she was, Maya Thompson, striding in with her usual purpose, a tablet tucked under one arm, her burgundy dress hugging her frame just enough to make his pulse jump. She looked like she belonged here, like she could run the whole damn company if he let her. And maybe, he thought, she should. "Got a minute?" she asked, her voice steady, but with that faint southern lilt that always caught him off guard. "I've got an idea for the West End project." James gestured to the chair across from his desk. "For you, always." She sat, crossing her legs, and launched into it. The West End project was a big one, a mixed-use development in one of Atlanta's oldest, poorest neighborhoods, a place most developers had written off as a lost cause. Carter Group had bought the land cheap, planning a standard retail and apartment combo, but Maya had other ideas. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with conviction. "We're thinking too small," she said, tapping her tablet to pull up a rendering. "This isn't just about buildings, it's about community. What if we had a cultural center? A space for black artists, musicians, kids from the neighborhood to learn and create. Make it a hub, not just another strip mall. James leaned back, studying the screen but mostly studying her. The way her hands moved as she talked, confident but graceful, like she was painting the future in the air. The way her voice carried a fire that made him want to believe in something bigger than profit margins. He'd built his career on calculated risks, but Maya, she was dreaming in a way he'd forgotten how to. "It's bold," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "But the board's gonna want numbers, not dreams. Cultural centers don't exactly scream ROI. Her lips curved into a half smile, like she'd been expecting the pushback. "I've got numbers. I ran the projections. Public grants, tax incentives, plus the PR boost from doing something real for the community. It's not just feel-good. It's smart business." She slid the tablet across the desk, and their fingers brushed for a split second. It was nothing, just a graze of skin, but it sent a jolt through James, like static electricity on a winter day. He cleared his throat, focusing on the screen, but he could feel her watching him, could smell the faint jasmine of her perfume. For a moment, he was back in that conference room, her lips on his, the world falling away. "All right," he said, forcing his voice steady. "You're in charge. Run with it. But I'm coming with you to the site tomorrow. I want to see this vision of yours up close." Maya's smile widened, genuine and unguarded, and it hit him like a punch to the chest. "Deal," she said. "But don't expect me to go easy on you, boss." The next morning, they drove to the West End, the city giving way to narrow streets lined with shotgun houses and corner stores. The site was a sprawling, vacant lot, overgrown with weeds, flanked by a crumbling church and a laundromat with a flickering neon sign. James parked his BMW, feeling out of place in his tailored suit, while Maya stepped out in a white blouse and jeans, her hair in a high ponytail, looking like she'd been born to this place. She led the way, her boots crunching on gravel, pointing out where the cultural center could go, where the apartments would rise, where kids could play without dodging traffic. "This was my neighborhood, you know," she said, her voice softer now, almost wistful. "Not here, but close. Places like this raised me. They deserve better than being forgotten." James watched her, the way the morning light caught the curve of her cheek, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her grandmother's stories of juke joints and church choirs. He wanted to ask her more, to know every detail of her life, but he held back, aware of the line between them. Instead, he said, "You're making me see this place differently, Maya. I'm in." They stood close, the air warm with the promise of summer, and a breeze tugged at her blouse, pressing it against her skin. James's gaze lingered a moment too long, tracing the outline of her collarbone, and she caught him. Her eyes flicked to his, a question there, maybe a challenge. For a heartbeat, he thought she might step closer, might let the moment tip into something dangerous. But then her phone buzzed, and she turned away, answering with a quick, "Hey, Nathan." James shoved his hands in his pockets, the spell broken. Nathan Brooks, her fiancé, the guy who got to hold her at night, who got to build a life with her. James didn't know much about him, just that he was a civil engineer, steady, the kind of guy who'd never kiss his employee in a moment of weakness, the kind of guy James could never be. Back at the office, the West End project became their obsession. They worked late most nights, poring over designs, meeting with architects, pitching to community leaders. Maya was a force, charming, skeptical residents, negotiating with suppliers, all while keeping James's chaotic schedule in check. But the closer they worked, the harder it was to ignore the pull between them. It was in the way their shoulders brushed when they leaned over blueprints, the way her laugh made his chest ache, the way her voice softened when they were alone, like she was letting him see a piece of herself she kept hidden from the world. One afternoon, they were at the site again, standing under a tarp as a light rain pattered around them. Maya was explaining her vision for a mural on the cultural center's wall, something bold, celebrating Black history, and James couldn't stop watching her. The rain had dampened her hair, curling it against her neck, and a drop slid down her skin, catching the light. He wanted to reach out to trace that drop with his finger, to feel the warmth of her pulse under his touch. Instead, he shoved his hands deeper into his coat, his jaw tight. "You okay?" she asked, turning WC. "You look like you're a million miles away." He forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking about how you're gonna pull this off. It's a lot." She grinned, undeterred. "Oh, I'll pull it off. You just keep up, old man." The teasing hit him like a spark, and he laughed, the tension easing for a moment. But as they walked back to the car, their arms brushed, and the air crackled again. He caught her scent. Jasmine and something earthier, like the rain-soaked ground. And his heart thudded. He wondered if she felt it too, or if he was just a fool chasing shadows. But trouble was brewing, and it came in the form of Claire Mitchell, a senior project manager who'd been with Carter Group for years. Claire was sharp, ambitious, and had a chip on her shoulder about Maya's rapid rise. She'd been gunning for the West End project, and when James handed it to Maya, the resentment festered. By the end of the week, whispers started circling the office. Maya was only leading the project because she had a thing with the boss. The rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by Claire's subtle digs in meetings and hallway conversations. James caught wind of it from Tom in HR, who pulled him aside after a staff meeting. "People are talking, boss," Tom said, his voice low, "about you and Maya. It's not good for morale." James's stomach twisted. He'd been so careful, or thought he had, but he knew how it looked. The late nights, the site visits, the way he couldn't help but light up when Maya walked into a room. He wanted to shut the rumors down, to protect her, but he wasn't sure how without making it worse. That evening, Maya stormed into his office, her eyes blazing. She shut the door with a thud and stood there, arms crossed, her burgundy dress clinging to her like a second skin. James stood, his heart racing, not just from her anger, but from the way she filled the room, fierce and unyielding. "Is it true?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Are people saying I got this project because I'm sleeping with you?" The accusation hit like a slap. "Maya, no," he said, stepping around his desk. "It's just talk." Claire's stirring the pot, probably because she wanted the lead. Maya's jaw tightened, her eyes searching his. "I don't need your favors, James. I earned this, and I don't need people thinking I'm some kind of—" "You earned it," he cut in, his voice firm. "You're the best person for this job, period. I'll handle Claire, I swear." She held his gaze, and for a moment, the air between them was heavy, charged with everything they weren't saying. He wanted to close the distance, to pull her into his arms, to tell her he'd do anything to make this right. But she was engaged, and he was her boss, and the world wasn't kind to love like this. "I can't do this if people don't respect me," she said finally, her voice softer now, almost breaking. "I need you to fix this, James, for both of us." He nodded, his throat tight. "I will. You have my word." She turned to leave, but paused at the door, glancing back. "Don't make this harder than it already is," she said. And then she was gone. James stood there, the silence deafening, her words echoing in his head. He'd promised to fix it, but how? The rumors weren't just about Maya. They were about him, too. About the feelings he couldn't hide, no matter how hard he tried. He sank into his chair, staring out at the city lights, and realized the truth. He was falling for her, deeper every day, and it was tearing everything apart. Maya, meanwhile, drove home to the apartment she shared with Nathan, her mind a storm. She loved Nathan. Steady, kind, the man who'd been there through every hurdle. But as she parked and sat in the dark, her hands gripping the steering wheel, she couldn't shake the memory of James's touch. The way his eyes made her feel seen in a way Nathan never quite did. She hated herself for it, for letting James get under her skin, for risking everything she'd worked for. Tomorrow she'd go back to the office, head high, ready to prove herself. She'd fight for the West End project, for her reputation, for the community she'd promised to lift up. But tonight, alone in her car, she let herself feel the weight of it all, the rumors, the pressure, and the dangerous pull of a man she could never have. The Miami sun was relentless, blazing down on the glass and steel tower where Carter Group was pitching to a group of deep-pocketed investors. James Carter adjusted his tie in the elevator, stealing a glance at Maya Thompson beside him. She was all business in a tailored black dress that hugged her curves, her tablet clutched like a shield, her expression focused, but unreadable. They hadn't talked about the kiss in the conference room or the rumors Claire Mitchell had spread. 2 weeks of tiptoeing around each other, sticking to safe topics like budgets and timelines, but the air between them was thick, every glance a reminder of what they were both trying to forget. "You ready for this?" James asked, his voice low, as the elevator dinged and opened to a sleek boardroom. Maya gave him a sidelong look, her lips curving just enough to make his chest tighten. "Born ready," she said, that southern drawl slipping through. "You just try to keep up." He chuckled, but the sound died in his throat as she stepped out, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her confidence lighting up the room like a flare. He followed, his mind half on the pitch and half on her, the way her dress shifted with each step, the way her hair caught the light. Get it together, Carter, he told himself. She was his employee, engaged to another man, and he was playing with fire. But knowing that didn't stop the wanting. The pitch went off without a hitch. Maya took the lead, her voice steady as she walked the investors through the West End project. A vision of affordable housing, green spaces, and a cultural center that would breathe life into a forgotten neighborhood. She had the room eating out of her hand, answering tough questions with data and charm, her passion making the numbers feel like poetry. James chimed in with the financials, but he was mostly watching her, marveling at how she could make a room full of suits believe in something bigger than profit. By the time they wrapped up, the investors were nodding, promising to follow up, and James knew they'd sealed the deal. As they rode the elevator back down, alone again, he couldn't help himself. "You were incredible in there," he said, turning to face her. "I mean it, Maya. You're changing the game." She met his eyes, and for a moment, the professional mask slipped. "Thanks," she said softly, her voice catching. "It means a lot, coming from you." The air hummed, the space between them shrinking. James's hand twitched, itching to reach for her, to pull her close like he had that night in the office. But before he could do something stupid, the elevator doors slid open and the moment was gone. That evening, their flight back to Atlanta was canceled. Some mechanical issue, the airline said, compounded by a storm rolling in off the Atlantic. The airport was chaos, lines snaking through the terminal, and after an hour of arguing with the desk agent, James secured them rooms at a boutique hotel downtown. "Better than sleeping on the floor," he said, handing Maya her key card as they checked in. She arched an eyebrow, a teasing glint in her eye. "You sure you didn't orchestrate this, Carter? Trapping me in Miami sounds like your kind of move." He laughed, the tension easing for the first time all day. "If I was going to trap you, I'd pick a better spot than a hotel bar with overpriced drinks." "Challenge accepted," she shot back. And just like that, they were bantering like old friends, the weight of the past few weeks lifting, if only for a moment. The hotel bar was a cozy spot, all dim lights and velvet booths, with a jazz trio playing in the corner. They grabbed a high-top table, ordered drinks, a bourbon for him, a gin and tonic for her, and settled in, the storm outside a low rumble through the windows. The conversation started light. The investors, the project, the way one guy kept mispronouncing sustainability. But as the drinks loosened their guards, it turned personal. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't running an empire?" Maya asked, swirling her drink, her eyes catching the neon glow from the bar. James leaned back, considering. "Honestly, I don't know. I've been at this so long it's hard to imagine anything else. Maybe I'd be fixing up old cars, living somewhere quiet. You?" She smiled, a little wistful. "I used to want to be a curator, art galleries, museums, that kind of thing. Growing up, I'd spend hours at the library, flipping through books about Jacob Lawrence, Ramar Bearden. Granny thought I was crazy, but she'd drive me to every exhibit she could afford." He pictured her in a gallery, her voice bringing paintings to life, and the image was so vivid it hurt. "You'd be damn good at it," he said. "Still could be, you know." She shook her head, her smile fading. "Not with the path I'm on. This," she gestured vaguely, meaning the project, the company, her life. "It's bigger than me. I can't walk away." The jazz trio shifted to a slower tune, and the mood turned heavier. James took a sip of bourbon, the burn grounding him. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Like no matter how far you go, it's still there." Her eyes met his, searching, and he saw something flicker, recognition maybe, or vulnerability. "Every day," she said, almost a whisper. "But I keep running, because stopping feels like giving up." They sat in silence, the weight of her words settling between them. The bar felt smaller now, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Her hand rested on the table, inches from his, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. He wanted to reach for her, to feel the warmth of her skin, to tell her she didn't have to run alone. But he didn't. Not yet. The storm worsened, and by 10, it was clear they weren't leaving Miami tonight. They paid the tab and headed to the elevators, the tension from the bar trailing them like a shadow. In the hallway, outside her room, Maya paused, her keycard in hand, her eyes locked on his. The air was thick, charged, like it had been in the office that night. James stood closer than he should have, close enough to see the pulse at her throat, to catch the faint jasmine of her perfume. "Maya," he said, his voice rough, barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I wish we'd met in a different world, one where things were simpler." Her breath caught, and for a moment she didn't move. Her eyes searched his, and he saw the conflict there. Want, fear, duty, all tangled together. She stepped closer, just enough that he could feel the heat of her body, and his hand brushed hers, a spark igniting where their skin met. He leaned in, his heart pounding, and she didn't pull away. Their faces were inches apart, her lips parted, and he could almost taste the gin on her breath. "Don't say that, James," she murmured, her voice trembling. "You know why." But her hand stayed in his, her fingers curling slightly, and the world seemed to hold its breath. He wanted to kiss her, to cross the line they'd been dancing around for years, to hell with the consequences. And for a moment, he thought she wanted it too. But then she stepped back, her hand slipping from his, her eyes shuttering. "Good night, James," she said, her voice firm but soft, and she swiped her keycard, disappearing into her room. James stood there, his heart racing, the hallway silent except for the hum of the AC. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes, and let out a shaky breath. That moment, the almost kiss, the raw honesty, had changed everything. They'd admitted the pull between them, even if they hadn't acted on it, and there was no pretending anymore. He loved her, and he was pretty damn sure she felt something too, but she was engaged, and he was her boss, and the world wasn't built for a love like theirs. Back in Atlanta, the fallout was immediate. Maya started keeping her distance, scheduling meetings through email, avoiding late nights. James felt the absence like a physical ache, but he respected her space, throwing himself into the West End project to keep his mind off her. He started attending a workshop on diversity in business, something Maya had mentioned in passing, hoping to understand the world she navigated every day. It was a small step, but it made him see things he'd been blind to. The casual slights, the unspoken barriers, the way his privilege had shaped his path in ways hers never could. One evening he called his sister Sarah, a journalist who'd always been his sounding board. They met at a dive bar in Decatur, the kind of place with sticky tables and a jukebox playing Springsteen. Over beers, he told her everything. The kiss, the rumors, the night in Miami. Sarah listened, her blue eyes sharp, and when he finished, she leaned back, crossing her arms. "You're in deep, Jimmy," she said, using the nickname she'd given him as kids. "But you gotta ask yourself, is this about love, or is it about you feeling alive again? Because if you're gonna blow up her life, you better be sure." He stared at his beer, the truth of her words cutting deep. "I don't want to hurt her," he said, "but I can't stop feeling this way." Sarah sighed, softening. "Then let her choose. Don't make her carry your feelings on top of everything else she's got going on. Be the guy she can trust, not the one who complicates her world." Meanwhile, Maya was grappling with her own storm. At home with Nathan, she felt the distance growing. He was planning their wedding, talking about venues and guest lists, but she couldn't shake the memory of James's hand in hers, the way his voice had cracked when he'd said he wished for a different world. One night, Nathan caught her staring out the window, her engagement ring twisting on her finger. "You okay, babe?" he asked, his voice gentle but edged with worry. "You've been off lately." She forced a smile, turning to him. "Just work stress," she lied, hating herself for it. "The project's kicking my butt." But as she lay awake that night, Nathan's arm heavy across her waist, she couldn't stop the questions. Did she love him enough to marry him? Or was she clinging to safety, afraid to face the chaos of what she felt for James? And if she let herself feel that, what would it cost her? Her career, her family, her place in a community that had fought so hard for her to succeed. The West End project moved forward, but the office was a minefield. Claire's rumors hadn't died, and Maya felt the weight of every glance, every whisper. She threw herself into work, determined to prove them wrong, but the effort was exhausting. One afternoon, she found a flyer for a local art exhibit in her mailbox, a showcase of black artists with a note from James. "Thought you might like this. J." It was a small gesture, but it hit her hard, a reminder of the man who saw her in ways no one else did. As she drove to the exhibit that weekend, her heart heavy, she knew things couldn't stay like this. She and James were on a collision course, and sooner or later, they'd have to face the truth, or walk away for good. The Carter Group's headquarters buzzed with the kind of frenetic energy that only a crisis could spark. Papers littered every desk, phones rang off the hook, and the air was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and stress. A hostile takeover bid had reared its ugly head, led by a rival firm sniffing blood after a failed project in Nashville had tanked the company's stock. James Carter stood at the head of the conference room, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the room as his team scrambled to counter the threat. But his focus kept drifting to Maya Thompson, who sat across the table, her tablet glowing with spreadsheets, her expression a mask of determination. It had been 3 weeks since Miami, 3 weeks since that almost kiss in the hotel hallway, and they'd both been walking on eggshells. Maya had thrown up walls, keeping meetings short, sticking to email, avoiding the late-night sessions that had once been their norm. James felt the distance like a bruise, but he couldn't blame her. She was engaged to Nathan Brooks, fighting to prove herself in a company where rumors still swirled, thanks to Claire Mitchell's poison. And he He was the idiot who'd let his heart get the better of him, kissing her in a moment of weakness, making everything messier than it had to be. James. Maya's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp but professional. We need to lock in the community grants for West End before the board meeting. If we lose those, the project's dead. He nodded, forcing his mind back to the present. Right. Get me the paperwork by tomorrow and I'll push it through. She held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary, and he caught a flicker of something. Anger, maybe, or exhaustion. Then she looked away, typing furiously, and the moment passed. James rubbed his temples, the weight of the takeover and his feelings for Maya pressing down like a vice. He needed to focus, to save the company, but all he could think about was her voice, her strength, the way she made him want to be a better man. The rumors Claire had started hadn't died. They'd mutated, spreading through the office like a virus. By now, the whispers weren't just about Maya getting the West End project because of some fling with James. They were uglier, insinuating she was using him to climb the ladder, that her talent was just a front. Claire was careful, never saying anything outright, but her sly comments in meetings. Oh, Maya, you're so close to the boss, you must know all his secrets, did the damage. James had tried to shut it down, calling Claire into his office for a warning, but she'd played innocent, her smile all sugar and venom. The gossip reached Maya's mother, Maya Thompson, a retired schoolteacher with a no-nonsense streak and a fierce love for her daughter. One evening, Maya's phone lit up with a call as she sat in her apartment, staring at a stack of wedding magazines Nathan had left on the coffee table. She answered, bracing herself. Maya Renee Thompson, Linda's voice crackled through, sharp as a whip. What's this I hear about you and some white man at work? People are talking, saying you're throwing away your reputation for a job. Maya's stomach dropped. Mama, it's not like that, she said, her voice tight. They're just rumors. I'm doing my job, that's all. Your job doesn't involve folks thinking you're that kind of woman, Linda snapped. You've worked too hard, baby. Don't let this man drag you down. Maya gripped the phone, her eyes stinging. She wanted to tell her mother the truth, that James wasn't just her boss, that she felt something for him she couldn't explain, something that scared her as much as it thrilled her. But how could she? Linda had raised her to be proud, to carry the weight of her community's expectations, to never let the world reduce her to a stereotype. Admitting she had feelings for a wealthy white man, a man who held power over her career, would only confirm her mother's worst fears. I'll handle it, Mama, she said finally, her voice hollow. I promise. She hung up, sinking onto the couch, the magazines mocking her. Nathan was out at a job site, and the apartment felt too quiet, too small for the storm in her head. She loved Nathan, his steadiness, his laugh, the way he'd cook her favorite shrimp and grits on Sundays. But when she closed her eyes, it was James she saw, his silver hair falling over his forehead, his eyes locking onto hers like she was the only thing that mattered. It was wrong, dangerous, but it was there, and she didn't know how to make it stop. The next day, Maya marched into James's office, her heels clicking with purpose, her face set. She shut the door behind her, the sound echoing like a gunshot. James looked up from his desk, his heart kicking up a notch at the sight of her, her navy blazer sharp, her hair in a sleek bun, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and resolve. We need to talk, she said, crossing her arms. This, she gestured between them. Whatever it is, it's ruining me. People are saying I'm sleeping my way to the top, James. My mother heard it. I can't keep doing this. James stood, his hands raised like he could ward off her words. Maya, I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough. I never meant for this to happen. I told Claire to back off, and I'll make it clear to everyone. You earned. Doesn't involve getting tangled up with your boss, Linda snapped, her tone a mix of worry and warning. You've worked too hard to let folks think you're that kind of woman. You hear me? Maya gripped the phone, her knuckles whitening. I hear you, Mama, she said, her voice barely steady. "I'll handle it." She hung up, her heart pounding, and sank onto the couch. The apartment was quiet. Nathan out at a late meeting, the wedding magazines mocking her from the table. She loved Nathan. His steadiness, his laugh, the way he'd stood by her through every hurdle. But the truth was clawing at her. She felt something for James. Something she couldn't name. Something that scared her as much as it thrilled her. And now, with her mother's words ringing in her ears and the office gossip closing in, she felt like she was drowning. The next morning, Maya marched into James's office, her jaw set, her eyes blazing. She shut the door with a firm click and stood there, arms crossed, her emerald green blouse catching the light. James looked up from his desk, his heart lurching at the sight of her, fierce, beautiful, and clearly pissed. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low but cutting. "This rumor mill's gone too far. My own mother's heard it, James. My mother. I can't keep doing this if people think I'm only here because of you." James stood, his hands raised like he was trying to calm a storm. "Maya, I'm sorry. I thought I'd handled Claire, but—" "You thought wrong," she cut in, stepping closer, her eyes locked on his. "I've spent my whole career proving I belong in rooms like this, and now I'm a punchline because we—" She stopped, her breath hitching, and he knew she was thinking of the kiss, of Miami, of every moment they'd let the line blur. He wanted to close the distance, to pull her into his arms and tell her he'd fix it, no matter what it took. But he stayed rooted, his voice low. "You're not a punchline, Maya. You're the best damn thing this company's got. I'll make this right, I swear." "How?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "You can't just snap your fingers and make people stop talking. Every time we're in a room together, they're watching, waiting for proof they're right. And I'm tired, James. I'm so damn tired." Her vulnerability hit him like a freight train. He stepped closer, unable to stop himself, and for a moment they were inches apart, the air between them heavy with everything unsaid. He could see the pulse at her throat, could smell that jasmine perfume that drove him crazy. His hand twitched, aching to touch her, to wipe away the exhaustion in her eyes. But she stepped back, shaking her head. "Fix this," she said, her voice firm but soft. "For both of us." She turned and left, the door closing softly behind her, leaving James alone with the weight of her words. He sank into his chair, his head in his hands, and realized he was losing her, not just her heart, but her trust, her presence. And that hurt more than anything. The takeover bid was a beast, demanding 18-hour days and every ounce of James's focus. He and Maya worked side by side, but it was different now, formal, guarded, like they were strangers playing roles. She was brilliant as ever, rallying the team, drafting counteroffers, calming jittery board members. But every time their eyes met, there was a wall, and James hated himself for helping build it. Outside the office, the pressure was mounting. Nathan sensed something was off, his questions sharper, his patience thinner. One night, as they cooked dinner in their cramped kitchen, he set down a knife and turned to Maya, his brown eyes searching. "You're not yourself," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Is it work, or is it him?" Maya froze, her hand hovering over a cutting board. "Him?" she asked, though she knew exactly who he meant. "Carter," Nathan said, his jaw tight. "You're different when you talk about him, like he's more than just your boss." She wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but the lie stuck in her throat. "It's work, Nathan," she said finally, turning back to the vegetables. "The takeover's got us all on edge." He didn't push, but the silence that followed was louder than any argument. Maya lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, her engagement ring heavy on her finger. Nathan had proposed 6 months ago, and she'd said yes without hesitation. But now, with James's voice echoing in her head, with the memory of his touch burning her skin, she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. James wasn't faring much better. The rumors had reached the board, and one of the older members, a silver-haired guy named Ed Grayson, pulled him aside after a meeting. "You need to watch yourself, Carter," Ed said, his voice low. "This thing with your project manager, it's making people nervous. Investors don't like drama, and neither do we." James's blood boiled, but he kept his cool. "There's nothing to watch," he said, his tone clipped. "Maya's earned her place. The rumors are just that, rumors." Ed raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Perception's reality in this game. You know that." The warning stung, not because it was unfair, but because it was true. James had spent decades building Carter Group, and now his feelings for Maya were threatening to tear it down. He started drinking more, a glass of bourbon becoming 2, then 3, as he sat alone in his penthouse, the Atlanta skyline mocking him with its indifference. He called Sarah again, meeting her at a soul food spot in Midtown, the kind of place where the air smelled of fried chicken and collards. Over plates of catfish and cornbread, he spilled his guts about the takeover, the rumors, the way Maya's distance was killing him. Sarah listened, her journalist's eyes sharp, and when he finished, she leaned back, sipping her sweet tea. "You're in a mess, Jimmy," she said, her voice softer than usual. "But you've got to decide what you're fighting for, the company or her, because you can't have both, not like this." "I don't want to lose her," he said, his voice rough, "but I don't know how to keep her without breaking everything." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Then be honest with yourself first. Figure out what you're willing to risk. And for God's sake, stop drinking before you do something stupid." Maya, meanwhile, sought out Darius King, her oldest friend and a community organizer who'd always been her sounding board. They met at a coffee shop in the West End, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. Darius listened as she poured out her fears about the rumors, her mother's disapproval, Nathan's suspicions, and the feelings for James she couldn't shake. "You're playing with fire, Maya," Darius said, his voice calm but firm. "Carter's a good guy, maybe, but he's a white man with power. You think the world's gonna let you two just be? Your community, your family. They'll see it as a betrayal." Her chest tightened, the truth of his words cutting deep. "I'm not trying to betray anyone," she said, her voice breaking. I feel something, Darius, and I don't know what to do with it." He leaned forward, his eyes softening. "Then figure out what you want, not what everyone else expects, but be ready for the fallout because it's coming." The breaking point came at a board meeting where Maya presented the latest on the West End project. She was flawless, her slides polished, her answers sharp, but Claire was there, her smile sharp as a blade. When Maya mentioned the cultural center, Claire chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It's a lovely idea, Maya, but are we sure it's not a bit personal? I mean, you're so invested, it almost feels like a favor from the top." The room went quiet, the implication hanging like smoke. Maya's face didn't falter, but James saw the flash of pain in her eyes. He stood, his voice cold. "That's enough, Claire. The Cultural Center's a board-approved initiative, and Maya's leading it because she's the best for the job. Anyone who thinks otherwise can take it up with me." The room stayed silent, but the damage was done. After the meeting, Maya caught James in the hallway, her voice low. "You can't keep fighting my battles," she said, her eyes searching his. "It only makes it worse." "I'm not fighting your battles," he said, stepping closer, his voice rough. "I'm fighting for you, Maya, because you deserve better than this." She looked at him, her breath catching, and for a moment, He thought she might let the wall down, but then she shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't do this, James. Not now." She walked away, leaving him standing there, his heart in pieces. That night, Maya called Nathan and told him she needed a break. Not a breakup, but time to think. He was quiet, hurt, but agreed, saying, "I love you, Maya. Just figure out what you want." The next day, she requested a temporary leave from Carter Group, citing personal reasons. James approved it, his signature heavy on the form, knowing she was slipping away. As he sat in his penthouse, a bottle of bourbon half empty on the table, he realized the truth. He was losing everything, his company, his reputation, and the woman he loved. And he had no one to blame but himself. The Carter Group's office was a war zone, papers and coffee cups scattered like casualties of the battle against the hostile takeover bid. It was past midnight, the Atlanta skyline a glittering backdrop through the windows, and the air was thick with tension. James Carter stood at the head of the conference table, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his silver hair disheveled from running his hands through it. Across from him, Maya Thompson leaned over a laptop, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion etched into her face. She'd returned from her leave 2 weeks ago, diving back into the fight to save the company. But the distance between them was palpable, professional, cold, a wall neither seemed able to breach. They'd won a small victory that day, securing a key investor to bolster their defense, but the war wasn't over. The board was still jittery, the stock price shaky, and every move felt like a gamble. James glanced at Maya, her emerald blazer draped over a chair, her white blouse clinging to her frame from the long hours. She was typing, her fingers flying, but he caught the way her shoulders slumped, the weight she carried heavier than ever. "We need to finalize the counteroffer by tomorrow," she said, not looking up. "If we don't, they'll push for a vote and we're done." James nodded, his throat tight. "I know. You've got everything lined up?" She met his eyes then, and for a moment the room shrank, the world narrowing to just them. "I always do," she said, her voice softer now, almost intimate. But then she looked away, breaking the spell, and went back to her laptop. He wanted to say something, anything to bridge the gap, to tell her he missed her, that he was sorry for the rumors, for the kiss, for making her life harder. But the words stuck, and he just stood there, a man worth millions feeling like a fool. The team had gone home hours ago, leaving them alone, and the silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the AC and the distant rumble of a city that never slept. The turning point came at 2 a.m., when they finally nailed the counteroffer. Maya leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms above her head, her blouse pulling tight, and James had to look away, his pulse jumping. She caught him, a small smile tugging at her lips, and for the first time in weeks, the wall seemed to crack. "We did it," she said, her voice warm, almost like the old Maya. "We might actually pull this off." He grinned, the relief washing over him. "Couldn't have done it without you," he said, and he meant it, not just about the company, but about everything. His life, his heart, the man he was becoming because of her. She stood, walking to the window, her silhouette framed against the skyline. "You ever wonder what we're doing all this for?" she asked, her voice quiet. "All this fighting, all this stress, what's it really worth?" James joined her, standing close enough to feel the heat of her body, to catch that jasmine scent that haunted him. "I used to think it was about winning," he said, his voice low, "building something that lasts. But lately, I don't know. Maybe it's about something else." She turned to him, her eyes searching his, and the air crackled, heavy with everything they'd been holding back. "Like what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He stepped closer, his heart pounding, and this time he didn't stop himself. "Like you," he said, his voice rough. "Like us." Her breath caught, and for a moment, they stood frozen, the world holding its breath. Then, like a dam breaking, they moved, her hands reaching for his shirt, his pulling her close, their lips crashing together in a kiss that was all fire and desperation. It was deeper than the first, hungrier, a release of years of longing and pain. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, his hands slid up her back, feeling the strength beneath her blouse. And for a moment, there was no company, no fiancé, no world outside this room. Just them, burning, alive. She pulled back, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with a mix of want and fear. "James," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've tried so hard not to feel this, but I can't. I can't pretend anymore." The words hit him like a lightning bolt, a confession he'd dreamed of but never expected. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek, and said, "I love you, Maya. I've loved you since the day you walked into my office, but I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me." Her eyes shimmered, and she leaned into his touch, her voice breaking. "I don't know what I want, James. I love Nathan, but you're under my skin and I can't shake you." They stood there, foreheads touching, the weight of her words settling between them. The kiss had changed everything, bearing the truth they'd both tried to bury. But it also made the stakes clear. She was engaged, he was her boss, and the world wasn't kind to love like theirs. The next morning, the office was a blur of activity, but Maya and James moved through it like ghosts, their secret heavy between them. She threw herself into work, avoiding his gaze while he buried himself in calls, trying to ignore the ache in his chest. But the truth was out, and there was no going back. That evening, Maya met Darius at a jazz club in the West End, the kind of place where the music was loud and the drinks were strong. Over a glass of wine, she told him everything. The kiss, her confusion, the way James's words had cracked her open. Darius listened, his face unreadable, and when she finished, he leaned back, his voice steady. "You're at a crossroads, Maya," he said. "Nathan's your safe bet, the life you planned. Carter's a risk, not just because of who he is, but because of what it'll cost you. Your family, your community, they won't make it easy." She nodded, her throat tight. "I know. But what if I'm tired of playing it safe? What if I want to feel alive?" Darius's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Then choose for you, not for them, but be ready for the fallout." James, meanwhile, sought out Sarah at her apartment, a cozy loft cluttered with books and half-finished articles. Over takeout pizza, he told her about the kiss, about Maya's confession, about the love that felt like a gift and a curse. Sarah listened, her blue eyes sharp, and when he finished, she set down her slice, wiping her hands. "You're in deep, Jimmy," she said, her voice gentle but pointed. "But you've got to let her lead. She's got more to lose than you do. Her career, her family, her place in a world that's already hard on her. Don't make her carry your heart on top of that." "I don't want to hurt her," he said, his voice rough. "But I can't keep pretending I don't love her." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing his arm. "Then show her you're worth the risk. Not with words, with actions. Step up or step back." The fallout came faster than either expected. Maya called Nathan that weekend, her hands shaking as she told him she couldn't marry him. Not now, maybe not ever. She didn't mention James, but Nathan wasn't fooled. "It's him, isn't it?" he asked, his voice thick with hurt. "Carter." "It's not that simple," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I need to figure out who I am, Nathan. I'm sorry." He was quiet for a long time, then said, "I love you, Maya, but I can't wait forever." They hung up and she sat in her apartment, the silence deafening, her engagement ring on the table, a symbol of a life she wasn't sure she wanted anymore. At the office, James made a decision that shook him to his core. He called a board meeting and announced he was stepping down as CEO, effective after the takeover was resolved. "It's time for new leadership," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "Maya Thompson's the right person to take us forward." The board was stunned, but Maya's track record, her handling of the West End project, her leadership in the takeover fight, made it hard to argue. She was in the room, her eyes wide, and when their gazes met, he saw a mix of shock and gratitude, maybe even something deeper. After the meeting, she caught him in his office, her voice low. "Why?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "Why give it all up?" "Because you're the future," he said, stepping closer, his voice rough. "And because I want you to have everything you deserve without me holding you back." She looked at him, her breath catching, and for a moment, he thought she might kiss him again. But she just nodded, her eyes shimmering, and said, "Thank you, James." The takeover was resolved a week later, the rival firm backing off after a fierce counteroffer. The company was safe, but James and Maya were anything but. As she prepared to take the CEO role, she requested one last meeting with him, her voice formal over the phone. James agreed, his heart heavy, knowing this might be the end of whatever they'd had. He sat in his penthouse that night, a glass of bourbon untouched on the table, staring at the skyline. He'd given up his company, his armor, for a woman who might never be his. But as he thought of her, her strength, her fire, the way she'd changed him, he realized it was worth it. Love, he was learning, wasn't about possession. It was about letting go, about becoming someone better because of it. Maya in her apartment stood by the window, the city lights blurring through her tears. She'd lost Nathan, maybe her mother's trust, but she'd gained something too, a clarity about who she was, what she wanted. And as she prepared to meet James, she knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, she was ready to face it, head high, heart open. The West End Cultural Center stood like a beacon in the heart of Atlanta's oldest neighborhood, its glass facade gleaming under the late afternoon sun. Inside, the air buzzed with life. Kids laughing in an art workshop, a jazz quartet rehearsing in the auditorium, murals of black heroes like Zora Neale Hurston and John Lewis splashing color across the walls. James Carter stood in the lobby, his hands in his pockets, taking it all in. This was Maya Thompson's vision, brought to life, a testament to her strength and heart. And today, it was where they'd say goodbye. 6 months had passed since James stepped down as CEO of Carter Group, handing the reins to Maya. The takeover bid was a distant memory, the company thriving under her leadership, her name now a fixture in industry circles. She'd become the first black woman to lead a major real estate firm in the South, her face gracing Forbes and Atlanta Business Chronicle. James had watched from afar, pride mingling with a quiet ache, as she built a legacy he'd only dreamed of. He'd left Atlanta for a while, settling in a small town outside Savannah, where he'd started a foundation to fund black entrepreneurs in real estate. He'd named it after Maya's grandmother, Ruby, a nod to the woman who'd shaped her fire. It was his way of honoring her, of keeping her close without holding her back. But when she'd called last week, asking to meet at the cultural center, he hadn't hesitated. One last conversation, one last chance to see her. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew he'd carry it with him forever. The door to the auditorium opened, and there she was, Maya, striding toward him in a cream dress that hugged her frame, her hair in loose curls, her smile warm but guarded. She looked different, lighter somehow, like she'd found a piece of herself she'd been missing. James's heart thudded, the same way it had the first day she'd walked into his office, all those years ago. "James," she said, her voice soft, that southern drawl wrapping around his name like a melody. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. He gestured around them, taking in the vibrant space. This place. It's everything you said it would be. You did it, Maya. Her smile widened, genuine and unguarded, and it hit him like a wave. We did it, she corrected, stepping closer. You believed in me when no one else did. That's not something I'll ever forget. They stood there, the hum of the center around them, and for a moment, it felt like old times. Late nights in the office, dreaming big, the world theirs to conquer. But the weight of their history hung between them, heavy with kisses and confessions, with choices made and chances lost. Walk with me? She asked, nodding toward a courtyard outside. He followed, his hands still in his pockets, afraid if he let them free, he'd reach for her. The courtyard was a small oasis, with a fountain bubbling in the center and benches tucked under magnolia trees. They sat, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the stone. Maya clasped her hands in her lap, her eyes on the fountain, and James waited, sensing she needed to lead this. I owe you an explanation, she said finally, her voice steady but laced with emotion. About everything, Nathan, the company, us. He shook his head, his throat tight. You don't owe me anything, Maya. I'm the one who made things messy. She turned to him, her eyes fierce. No, James. You gave me a chance to be more than I thought I could be. You saw me, really saw me, when I was just another name on a resume. That's not messy. That's everything. Her words hit him hard, cracking open the armor he'd built since leaving Atlanta. He wanted to tell her how much she'd changed him, how loving her had made him a better man. But he held back, letting her speak. I ended things with Nathan, she said, her voice softer now. Not because of you, not entirely, but because I wasn't being honest with myself. I was holding on to a life I thought I was supposed to want, not the one I needed. He's a good man, but he deserved someone who could love him completely. I couldn't do that, not with you in my heart. The confession stole his breath, a spark of hope flaring before he could stop it. But her next words tempered it. I'm seeing someone new, she said, her eyes meeting his, steady but kind. It's early, but it's good. He's someone who gets my world, who doesn't come with the complications we had. But I needed to see you, to tell you that what we felt, it was real. It mattered, and it always will. James nodded, his chest tight, a bittersweet peace settling over him. He'd dreamed of her choosing him, of a world where they could bridge the gaps, race, power, time. But hearing her now, seeing the strength in her eyes, he knew this was right. She was free, living the life she'd fought for, and that was enough. I love you, Maya, he said, his voice low, steady. I've loved you since the day you walked into my office, and I'll love you till the day I die. But I'm happy for you, truly. You're exactly where you're meant to be. Her eyes shimmered and she reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his. You're a good man, James Carter, she said, her voice breaking. Don't let anyone tell you different. They sat there, hands clasped, the fountain's soft gurgle filling the silence. It wasn't a kiss, wasn't a grand gesture, but it was theirs, a moment of truth, of closure, of love that didn't need to be possessed to be real. When she finally let go, standing to head back inside, she paused, looking back with a smile that held 1,000 memories. Thank you, she said, for everything. He watched her go, her dress catching the last rays of sunlight, and felt a weight lift. Not the love, that would stay, a quiet fire in his heart, but the pain of what might have been. He was free, too, in a way he hadn't expected. In the months that followed, James threw himself into the Ruby Foundation, traveling to cities across the South, meeting young black entrepreneurs with dreams as big as Maya's. He lived simpler now, trading his penthouse for a modest house near the coast, where he'd sit on the porch at night, a glass of iced tea in hand, the stars brighter than any city skyline. He wasn't lonely anymore, not the way he'd been. Loving Maya had taught him to open his heart, to see the world through her eyes, and that was a gift he carried into every new day. He kept tabs on Carter Group, reading about Maya's latest moves, a new affordable housing initiative, a partnership with local artists, a push for diversity in the industry. She was a force, her name synonymous with change, and every article, every photo of her smiling at a podium filled him with pride. He didn't need to be a part of her life to know he'd been part of her story, and that was enough. One evening, he got a package in the mail, a small, hand-painted ceramic tile from the West End Cultural Center, with a note in Maya's elegant script. For the man who helped me build something lasting. M. He placed it on his mantel, next to a photo of his sister Sarah, and smiled. It wasn't a love letter, but it was love in its own way. Maya, too, was finding her way. As CEO, she navigated boardrooms with the same fire she'd brought to her first interview. But now she carried a confidence that came from knowing herself. Her new relationship, with a professor who shared her love of art and history, was steady, uncomplicated, a partnership built on mutual respect. She stayed close to her community, hosting events at the Cultural Center, mentoring young black women in the industry. Her mother, Linda, had come around, proud of the woman Maya had become, even if she didn't fully understand the path. One night, at a fundraiser for the center, Maya stood on stage, her voice ringing out as she spoke about legacy, about building something that outlives you. The crowd was rapt, but her eyes kept drifting to the back of the room, half expecting to see James's silver hair, his quiet smile. He wasn't there, but she felt him, a presence in her heart, a reminder of the love that had pushed her to this moment. James stood on his porch one evening, the ocean breeze cool against his skin, the stars a canvas above. He thought of Maya, her laugh, her fire, the way she'd changed him, and felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. Love, he'd learned, wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go, about letting it transform you, then setting it free to do the same for someone else. He'd loved her silently, fiercely, and now he was living the life that love had made possible, a life of purpose, of connection, of hope. In Atlanta, Maya walked through the Cultural Center after hours, the lights dim, the murals glowing. She paused by a photo of the groundbreaking ceremony, her and James side by side, smiling. She touched the frame, her fingers lingering, and whispered, "Thank you." Then she turned, her heels echoing in the quiet, and stepped into the future she'd built, her heart full, her spirit alight. Hey folks, that's the end of James and Maya's story, and I hope it hit you as hard as it hit me. If their journey moved you, about love, sacrifice, and finding yourself, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What did their story teach you about love? Share your thoughts, and stay tuned for more stories that'll grab your heart and not let go. Thanks for being here.